Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode on the Lessons from the Game podcast. This is a different episode. It's a short form, but we're going to be doing a different spin on it. We're going to be talking about the Springbok defeat this weekend, and we want to give our insights on it, the lessons from the game way. So just to be clear to everybody, we're going to do our utmost best not to sound too rugby showy or too rugby punditry. I don't even know if that's a word if it exists, Ben. But anyway,
Is
Ben.
now.
Yeah, man, it is now a word, all right? It is now. So, yeah, man, Ben, great to see you again, man. Looking forward to chatting about this, and we've been speaking about this for a while. This is uncharted territory for us. We definitely don't want to go the route where we're debriefing games and it becomes a rugby show, that type of stuff. But we do believe there are key insights in the game which we can share with the audience. We have seen there's a lot of podcasts, there's a lot of YouTube shows that have really got stuck in there using that clickbait to hook people in, and they slamming the box and saying it's embarrassing. But you know what? For me, all I see from this game has been there are loads of lessons to be learned. And that is our podcast, Lessons from the Game. So I'll be handing it over to Ben. Any lessons that you feel is valuable for audience out of this game, players, coaches? Is there anything that stands out for us to get this conversation started?
Oh, there's so many. I love this. First of all, I love the scene, because I like yourself, I was fortunate enough to play in that stadium at Ellis Park. And so I'm thinking the Australians have come off the back of a 3-match series against the Lions. They're battle hardened. They arrive at Johannesburg. They're playing at altitude, and you know what it's like when you change in the cloaks in Ellis Park. Is a long walk down, and then there's a long. So they dealt with the occasion brilliantly, I thought, because they're playing at altitude. They haven't won in Joburg, I think, for like 63 years or something crazy like that, So the lessons, I think, reminded me that there's real fine margins, and when you're a coach, often you can throw the baby out with the bathwater. That big, you can think everything's wrong, but it's such fine margins, and you know better than I do, G, as a former international player and as a world-class coach, you know what it's like, and so the lessons for me were right. You control what you can control. It was a reminder. They've changed. They Rassie and those guys will have it under control. It's not like everything's drastically wrong. It's not like such fine margins and a couple of small things, and that was the underlying message for me that reminded me. So when people ask me this week in coaches, I'm thinking quite often people from the outside don't understand what's going on. So don't worry about them. You control what you can control, and you just make sure that the people internally go, okay, look, this is what we'll learn from it. What did we learn from it? Okay, there's individual facets of the game that we could have done better. And you go through them, don't you? You go, okay, attacking breakdown, what could we do differently there? Line out, what could we do differently there? When we made changes, was that the right time? Were they the right personnel? What could we do different there? Defensively, what can we tighten up, And you just go through it. But I think the underlying thing then, the underlying lesson is, when you're an inexperienced coach, you sometimes try and chase it, and you try and overcorrect during the week, and you get panicky. Well, when you're an experienced coach, and Rassie Erasmus is probably the most experienced coach in the world, when you're that guy, you just go, okay, guys, not everything was bad. We just need to just take it easy. Well, what about you, mate? What did you think?
Yeah, man, I think where I want to bring my lesson in. I think. The Springboks are trying to play a different style of rugby. They call it Tony ball in South Africa. I love that, Tony ball.
Oh, that's nice,
and, and I always say with games like this, I've been there. I've experienced that loss, losing at home. It's brutal. You don't do it on purpose, whether you're a player or a coach. And even with La Rochelle, we lost the 1 or 2 home games, which was tough last season, and you really feel it. And from a coach's point of view, those losses, you feel it. You take it upon yourself. You ask yourself, what could I have done better? What should I do better this week? You look at yourself first before you start pointing, but the players didn't do that. So I agree with you. With an experienced coach like Rassie, they're not going to be just chucking everything. So for me, I always say, when it comes to games like that, before you start debriefing, what went wrong or what they should have done, start to identify those small wins. So one of the small wins what I would like to identify is, firstly, the forwards' passing skills. You know, the attacking skill level has gone up. Something which South African forwards in the past weren't known for was just get that ball, run straight, break the wall. And all of a sudden, if you talk about, I don't know if it's the right word, in French we call dextérité de main. So you're talking about your dexterity of your fingers. I don't know if that is the right word. But looking at the skill level of the passing, you're looking at the willingness to offload. You know, so for me, that's a massive, massive plus point. You know, seeing the Springboks having that willingness to attack, trying to move away from that stigma of the just the direct, the maul. You know, they try to play a bit more attackingly, which is brilliant. So, as a former Springbok player and a massive Springbok supporter, I'm a big fan of it. And I mentioned this, Ben. I don't want people, and I did a post on it on social media. Let's get behind the team, and it's easy to go on this negative pathway and just criticize it. We're not here to do that today. But I think the big lesson for me, and we're seeing a team that is starting to offload really for the first time. Not the first time, but they're doing it more compared to what we've seen in the past. And we've experienced this back in the day at Toulouse. It takes time. It takes time to put that into play. But I think the biggest lesson I can share with the audience, when you want to offload, don't guess the offload. Don't think that's where the player is. Don't think that's where I should leave the ball and I'm hoping that my teammate will be there. You need to see it. You need to see it. You need to be tactically aware. And I share this because a lot of young rugby players, they're seeing high-level players capable of offloading, flick passes, doing all these crazy offloads, the sunny ball passes. Then all of a sudden, they start to try and replicate it. And sometimes you can just do a simple pass. But when you do get to offloading and you want to actually bring that into your game, that's something you need to develop. You know, you've got to put yourself into that situation, doing your skills after training, you know, that situational training, working on that offload, getting through the contact, freeing up your hands, changing sides of the ball. So I think that is one thing for me, I think, which I want to leave with the audience is when you want to offload, don't guess it. You know, you've got to actually see it.
I like that. And I think that with that comes, and just quickly on, because that's a rugby thing, and we're not, you know, we never really try and talk about the rugby stuff. And I'll talk about a lesson in 10 seconds time, but quickly on the rugby thing like that, you mentioned with the offload, the challenge there, as you know, is that, and this is maybe an area of the game that requires a tiny bit of practice for the box, and they'll be working on this week, is the attacking tackle area breakdown, because if you're running and you're expecting a pass, sometimes you might overrun and you haven't gone to clear the ruck out. And I remember there was I think that happened towards the end of the game, and they, you know, they were penalised for holding on at the breakdown because they just didn't get to the clear out quick enough. And that's right, real fine margins. And I just thought it was a couple of fine margins. But the key lesson, one of the key questions for a coach is how do we look at things and how do we deal with things? And also, this is in any walk of life, you know, as we always talk about in the corporate space. Do I focus on the things that went wrong, 3 or 4, and do I go throw in a hand grenade and shout and lose my cool and be emotional? Or do I go, okay, actually, guys, we just played against a team that have played the Lions in a 3-match series, and they're probably really battle-hardened. We've made a lot of changes. We've only been playing, I think, we played Italy, you know, etc., or do I just go, okay, actually, do I focus on the glass is half full? This went really well. Our kicking game, our aerial game was brilliant. Like Andre Esthazen came in and he was brilliant, you know, and he played really, really well. That was a real plus. This was a real plus. This was a real plus. This was a real plus. And do we build on them? Or do we like go crazy and like be very emotional and worry about the 3 or 4 momentum shifting times when there were small errors that led to tries? And I think that's a question we ask ourselves as coaches and leaders in an environment.
Yeah, I think it's a great point you're making. There was actually a lot of breaks in that game. It's something which we haven't seen in the past from Springbok teams. You know, Grant Williams, he made a few breaks. Jesse Krill, you know, Esthazen as well. You know, I think from a coaching point of view, you say, okay, right. So all of a sudden, we're finding this massive space. We are getting line breaks. So from a coaching point of view, what do we need to do better? It's our reaction speed, the reaction speed of the support runners. Are you in position? All right. I always telling players, you can't be eating your popcorn and watching the scene in front of you unfold. You know, you got to get there. You got to be in position. And we've seen players like that master it. If you look at with Toulouse, you got Antoine Dupont. You know, he does that role perfectly. It's like he anticipates the line break, and then all of a sudden, boom! You see him cutting corners, and he's right there at the right time. So that's a massive positive, Ben. And I think what people need to know, how does the mindset of a team like that work? You know, after a loss like that, what they will do, players will be watching the game. You know, they have access today, watching it on their phones, on their tablets, their computers. So they'll be watching it. But the coaches, I can tell you this from my point of view, when you have the routine of a coach, you always watch the game either the same day, unless you're mentally broken and you can't. You watch it the next morning. You're doing your homework. You watch the game in one go. You make your notes. Then you will have the the specialized coaches, the attacking coach, the defense coach, the morning coach, the line-out coach, the ruck coach. They will go into their specific areas and look for more detail and come up with better solutions, and then decide what will they be sharing in the week. I can tell you this, it's not just the Boks, but any professional team. It's very important to identify those plus points or those massive positive points, but then identifying the key areas that need to be tweaked. But I'll be honest with you, the big thing, the question I would ask is, and the biggest lesson for me is that, okay, 20 minutes, 20 points. It worked really well. So they kept on playing that. When you're trying something, you keep on going, you're not getting the results, then you change it up. And that's easy to say from a supporter point of view. It's easy to say as someone not involved in that setup, someone that's not there. And I'm sure the messages went on to the field. And, you know, I think the lesson from that is that sometimes when things don't go the way you want it to go, then you got to change it up. Then you kind of like got to go back to basics. Go towards your strengths, you know, rely on your strengths, get your confidence back up. Get up. We always talk in French about the gestion de temps faible. So it's managing those soft moments, you know. How do you manage those soft moments? How do you manage those moments where things are not going your way?
Yeah, and you know what, G, as well, you touched on it there. They had a 22-point lead. And one of the things in life, you know, you'll get this situation. So do we continue to attack, and the natural psychology? How do we deal with this situation? Andrew Trimble mentioned it last week on the pod. He said about when they played against the All Blacks and they beat them in Chicago. And before the game and then at halftime, Johnny Sexton and Rory Best said, look, don't sit back. We've got this lead now. Let's keep attacking, you know, because the mindset says, OK, we've got to defend a lead. And but that's a psychological lesson the players will go through. And they'll reference this game next time, won't they? Like, let's keep attacking. We can't sit back and defend a lead now. You know, we've got 22 points, and they'll reference that. So this will be something that will become something that's really positive for them going forward, and a frame of reference mentally where they can use it in future matches, I'm sure. And that's sort of psychologically, as a coach, I'm thinking, what situations can we recreate? How can we reinforce the momentum? What can we do? Do we make changes? Do we not make changes? Do we send the players out earlier and do a different, like a little mini warm up at the start of the second half, for example, just to switch them on again? What's the last messaging we give them? Is it attack? You know, and those little things I think will be interesting to see what they do this week as well.
No, for sure. And I think, all fairness to the Wallabies, you know, they are very strong, unstructured play. And, you know, they really exploited that. And I think which is important for all our audience listening to know that at the end of the day, you know, at that level, unstructured play is probably one of the toughest things, because if you have a turnover ball, your line is not always set. You're not connected. So, and we did see how Australia, they really exploited it really well. And I do believe, you know, someone like James O'Connor back in the swing of things In the beginning, he might have been out of sorts, but he found his feet and his experience came through. He played the right players, which was good. But I think from a defensive point of view, and for people to understand how it works, okay, it's easy to say, okay, a player missed a tackle, which caused the line break. But you got to look at the series of events that happened before that, which is important. I mean, I take back to probably one of my most heartbreaking moments in my rugby coaching career was losing against Toulouse in the final when Roman Intermac, he scored that try. He just hit that 60-meter gap. And Uje Sutini took it upon himself. He felt so bad. He thought it was his fault, but it wasn't his fault. It was all those sequence of events that led up to that moment. Our forwards were too tight around the ruck. Guys weren't looking up. Guys weren't getting off the line. And that's the important thing. When there's defensive errors, you can either be zoomed in on an individual, but from a coaching point of view, you're going to look at the collective efforts. You're going to look at all the guys in line. Okay, we had a turnover ball. What was our reaction speed? Did we get into the line? And I think that's very important. That's probably one of the toughest things to defend is when there's interceptions, when there's turnover ball because your line is not set, players are not in position. And I think that's a key lesson that when something changes in the game, in terms of if you're on attack and you lose the ball, get into position as quickly as possible. Connect with your teammates. Try to get the line set. That's very important. And at the end of the day, it comes down to reaction speed. Yeah,
that's a good point, G. And also, there's just, like I said at the outset, there's such fine margins, So I think about 50th minute, Hooper he got a jackal. And there was like a bit of a momentum shift then, and it just felt like the Aussies had a bit more energy. And because they, like I said, they've been playing 3 or 4 hard test matches in the last month or so. And it's just this fine margins. But that leads me on to the next point, which is if I'm a player, what's my mindset this week? What do I do? How do I react? What's the lessons we can take from this as a player? I think the average player, like, we might be thinking, okay, right, I did this badly or I did this badly, and they're overthinking, I need to focus on this. But your point there is a really valid one. I might have missed a tackle. Does that mean I go and do extra defensive work all week? Or actually, it probably wasn't even, I was slightly out of position because the guys inside me were too tight to the ruck. They didn't get their spacings. So I'm wasting my energy beating myself up. I just need to focus on what I can control and what I normally do and staying on task. What does the team need? How can I be the best teammate this week? How can I... And staying mentally present, I think, as well. I think that's important.
Ben, I think first the most important statement that I would like to make, Ben, is that because I hear a lot of people saying the Springboks are arrogant and the players are arrogant the way they went about it. No. I'm going to tell you this. I've played with some of those players. They were my youngsters back in the day, and I've met some of the new generation of players. The amount of humility that players have, the respect they have, I can tell you this: it wasn't arrogance. Things didn't go our way, and we're not here to decrypt every single detail. We're here to share the key insights. We're here to share the lessons from the game. But to answer your question, Ben, that type of players, that level of players, how does it work? They'll be reviewing their own game. They'll be reaching out to the coach responsible for a certain area. So if they made an attacking error, and let's use that example, we had a few poachers, a few jackals that went against us. Yeah. So the ball carrier, you will have a look at himself and say, okay, could I have maybe bought more time for my teammates, having a bit more leg drive? Could I have focused on making a bigger effort with the ball placement? Did I just fall and I just pushed it back, or did I actually use some upper body movement trying to get the ball as far away from the opposition? Did I make enough effort? Then you're going to look at your cleaners. Was my reaction speed good enough? Was my precision on the clean out good enough? Why did that jackal happen? Was it because we were slow? And it's the same that I mentioned earlier. You've got to look up to all the events that happened before. Were the players in place? Was there players going for the offload? All those type of things. So in terms of the mindset of the players, they'll be reaching out to all the different coaches responsible for specific areas and asking them, right, What can I do better? What should we be doing? What is the strategy? And the player will have a checklist this week. All right. Either you will be working on it mentally, making a note of it, and all right, this is what I need to do next time when I'm in that situation. Or in training, I will sharpen up, I'll increase my reaction speed to the ruck or to the situation. It comes down to tactical awareness at the end of the day. And then the coaches, they'll be focusing on giving players the right message, because we all know if you give too much information, it just gets watered down. So the amount of effort that, and people listening, they don't realize that. I'll give my personal example. Sometimes I have a meeting with the forwards, or last year with La Rochelle, and then I probably have about 4 to 5 minutes to speak to the players. But to prepare for that 4 to 5 minutes, it's hours and hours of work. I'm going through the scrums. I'm reviewing what happened the previous week. I'm reviewing the state of the players, where they are mentally, where they are physically, and looking at the players individually. We're focusing on what should we be telling these players? What is the message? What clips should I be showing? If I show this clip, what effect will it have? Will this bring their confidence up? Will it bring it down? So it's not an easy job. It's not an easy job. And sometimes, and I'm speaking to the South African public as well, we are a proud nation. Maybe we got a bit ahead of ourselves. I think it was a good lesson of humility for everybody, for the whole country. Put it that way, like, you can't take things for granted. Every game's a new game. Every game's going to be different than the one before. And those other teammates, or not teammates, the opposition stepping up to line, they're going to come for you. If you're world champions, they're going to come for you. So you got to keep that in mind, and that's something which we constantly told players, even at La Rochelle last year. Like, remember, guys, if you want back-to-back European Cups, when a team is playing you, that's their biggest game of the season.
Yeah, it's a cup final. Yeah,
exactly.
Every time.
So Ben, any other key insights that we can share with the audience? Any lessons that you think it's valuable for them?
Just quickly on that one, I think it's a really good insight for people to hear of what it looks like for you. So you get maybe a 4 to 5 minute window to present to the players, and you might try and get these what I call corridor conversations. You'll on the bus, and you'll get these little conversations with people, but to give it a little insight, you'll have watched the game 2 or 3 times, you'll have broken it down, then you'll be watching it again, but your facets of the game. Then you'll be looking at, you'll be reviewing the past game, you'll be reviewing the performances, then you'll be previewing the opposition, then you'll be previewing who might be on the bench for the opposition. And then when it gets announced again, you will be then previewing, okay, these guys are actually on the bench. Then you will be knowing who the referee is. And I, we've had these conversations before, but people won't have an insight into how much work goes into it from someone like yourself. And then you will be breaking that down, and you'll be breaking out how the referee favours different people at different times in different situations. You've analysed all their penalties that they give at different scrum times, and then you break that down for the player to simplify it so they don't have too much information and they have 4 to 5 minutes presentation, which is a real skill. It's a real art form to be able to break it down and not give too much information. And I think that's just, it's a really good insight for people listening, I think, because sometimes people think, oh, it's just a scrum, just hit them and push. And it's just like, where it gives you that insight into like the level of detail and preparation that someone like yourself does every day.
No, for sure. You spot on there. Like coaches, you watch the game over and over. If I can share my personal experience, like the amount of hours I spend, I will watch the game at least 2 times, full on 80 minutes, so I can add value where I can. If I see something happening in the game, I can maybe share to the collision coach, listen, we saw this, or so you can keep the conversation going and support and serve the other coaches as well. But when you come to the scrum, it would take me about 2 to 3 hours to review our scrums, because I would review it collectively, I would review it to the front row, I would review it individually. Then you got to start planning, what are you going to be sharing in the front row meeting? What are you going to share individually to players? What are you going to be sharing to the forwards? And then, like you just mentioned, then you start to analyze the opposition. That's another few hours of work. It takes anything between 2 to 4 hours, identifying their trends, identifying what they're doing, their tactics. And then what I would do as a scrum coach, once the opposition's team was announced, I would do the individual analysis, and that was another 4 to 5 hours of work. And that's just the scrum. And so each coach has his own different routine, and it comes down to your ruck coach or collision coach or contact coach. They'll be reviewing, debriefing the game. Then I will start analyzing the opposition, identifying the threats. And it's a lot of work that goes into it. So I think the reason we share the key insights with them, Ben, is that people also understand that, okay, people are working hard. Coaches are working hard. Players are putting in the work. I saw the box as well. The amount of time players are spending in front of the computer, asking questions to other coaches.
Yeah.
You know, they want to learn. They're eager to learn.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention that for a few reasons, but it's to give people insight, but also to, when people say, oh, they didn't really try very hard, they're not really focused, or they're not really going into the deep, and you're like, it gives people a bit of an insight into how much work is actually going into it,
No, I think, Ben, and there's something which I wrote as well. And, if you have to compare apples to apples, if you look at the Springboks, they should have won that game easily. And this is the beautiful thing about rugby, is that anybody can win on any given day.
Yeah.
And if you look at the Wallabies, they were the underdogs, and never underestimate the danger or the threat of the underdog mindset. Right? That is dangerous. And the lesson for me, if you look at the Wallabies, let's focus on the Wallabies. They gained confidence. They identified, okay, we scored that try just before halftime. That boosted them. They were still in it. They were reducing the gap. They were just focusing on the next step, the next job, using every single opportunity. But what I wrote down is here, physicality and aggression. They managed to match the physicality and aggression of the Boks. And even though Will Skelton might not have gotten those big runs which we are accustomed to, he took 2 defenders each time. He was taking a lot of energy from the players. But if you have physicality and you've got aggression, that can keep you in the game. That can keep you in the game. Just it buys you time, waiting for those opportunities to come.
100%. And I was thinking of that actually, because Angus Bell comes on at prop, and he carries the ball, and he does this one carry, and I think it's his first carry when he's come on. And he carries the ball and he makes a couple of meters. He actually gets a bit of a leg drive on and he goes through. And then his very next carry, I think it's his very next carry, he's on the right-hand side and it leads to the try. And what happens is the defenders opposite him know that he's just carried well the previous time, and they sort of get a bit tighter to him. They get tighter to each other, the defenders. The spacing is a bit reduced, and they have to respect the carry more. And it's just that simple, like you were saying, that physicality, because he sort of painted a picture on that first carry. He was physical, he went forward, and then that's when he tips it on to Harry Wilson. And they've had to double in on Angus Bell to respect that carry. And that's when he can do he's painted that one picture, and then he can do the other option. And he hits Harry Wilson on a good short line, and suddenly there's a bit of just from that simple, like you were saying, just doing the very basics, carrying strong that first time, it's allowed that foundation to maybe add another layer.
So that tip on pass, Ben, that's something that's been trained. And if you think about it, Joe Smith, he was, instrumental with Irish rugby back then. And I spoke to my former colleague, Don O'Karayan, and he mentioned how can I say, relentless Joe Smith was with the forwards. Having that, attacking the ball, attacking in 3s and 4s, having various options. And that's example of something that has been trained. Yeah. Something that has been drilled into them, and now it pays off. And the lesson from that is, don't underestimate the value of those micro skills.
Yeah.
The small extras you're doing after training, really being attentive and aware what's happening around you in training. Not if you're just going through the motions because you're in opposition, but if you're focusing on having the right lines, if you're focusing on having a quality pass, making the right decision at the right time, working on your situational awareness or tactical awareness, that's the result of it. And 100%. I think that's important for rugby players, no matter which level you play. If you have the ambition to become a better player, if you have the ambition to help your team, go to another level, don't underestimate the value of those micro skills. But Ben, I think we covered quite a bit before we sign. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, I think it's good. I'm looking forward to this weekend, and I think it's good. Hopefully, we get a bit of insight into the mentality and also the preparation detail, the level, and also how people can manage those situations to do with managing leads and pressure and things like that.
I think there's just one last point which I mentioned, Ben. I think it's a point what I picked up from this game is attacking composure in the 22 of your opposition. I think that is very important. We've seen it with various teams in top 14. You work so hard to get that opportunity in the 22. Then it's one player over-eager, rushing in the wrong place, and you tend to pay the price. We saw the example where we lost the ball on 2 occasions. One, there was cross-running, penalty. And the other one, I think it was Damon Williams. He came in short. He came in short, and we lost the ball holding on. So it's about the lesson from that is when you get into need to trust your system, trust your processes. Just keep on going. Be patient. We often obviously. At La Rochelle, we were same-side team, so we focus just hitting that ball, keep on chipping away. Eventually, it has to break. So, but yeah, there's loads of lessons, and I think to everybody listening or watching this podcast, it will be great to get your feedback. Ben and myself tried really hard to share our insights on the game without criticizing a team or breaking anyone down, because that's not the goal of this, and it's not the goal of our podcast. This is something new which we are exploring, to be honest with you guys. So we would really appreciate your feedback on that. So please leave a comment on YouTube or Spotify, whichever platform you're on. Or even better, give us your feedback in our school communities. I'm in my school community, Coach G, Level Up. Ben, your community as well, around rugby performance. If you can maybe give the name of your community, so if those who are on school, they can search for it.
Yeah, if you just type in either my name or rugby performance, you'll find me, rugby performance coach. You'll find me on school. Great place to have that interaction with us, and we can talk about it. You give us feedback as well, what you like more of as well. But also I think it's sometimes difficult to think about things from a different opinion or different point of view if you've not walked in that. And you and I have had similar sort of journeys, and sometimes somebody from a completely outside external point of view will shed light on an area and question something that for us is like, well, we've always done it that way, or it's obvious, or something like that. And it's good to get a different point of view. So please engage with us on there. It's not, it's definitely not meant to be a dictatorial type thing. It's definitely not a monologue from us telling you. It's got to be interactive, and we appreciate that as well.
No, awesome. And I think for everybody listening, if you want to get access to those communities, it's very simple. On Instagram, you can send us a DM on my Instagram profile. You can DM me the words school or community, and you'll automatically send the link to get access. Just be patient. We have to accept your request if you meet all the different requirements. And Ben, I think it's the same. They can DM me the word
DM
school.
Me.
Just DM the word school, so they know you would like the link, and he'll just pass on that link. All right, guys. Thanks for taking the time to listen to us or watch our podcast show, Lessons from the Game. If there's anything that you would like us to talk about or dive in a bit deeper, please let us know. We really rely on your feedback, and hopefully this will be the first of many, Ben. So it all depends. We will definitely be taking the time to review this episode, look at what we said, what we can say better, and as I mentioned, we're not trying to be another rugby show.
Cheers, G.
Cheers,
Good
guys.
to see you.
Ciao.